All right, guys. So we are going to jump into our introductions. So I am Dr. Desiree Veramontes. I am the McKinney-Vento State Coordinator, housed in the highly mobile and at-risk student programs. And I'm going to let the team introduce themselves.
Good morning, everybody. I almost said good afternoon. Not there yet. My name is Dr. Ann Lay, and I am the HMAR Program Specialist.
And good morning. I am John Dobbins. I'm an HMIR specialist also, and I just recently joined the team, and I'm glad to be here.
You guys want to send some love for John. He just started with us in January. We are so excited to have him here. This is going to be his first webinar. Look at all that love, John. You're getting all kinds of emoji love from our audience. Thank you guys. We're really excited to have him here. He adds a new depth to our team. He was a principal and did a lot of different things in education. So love having the expertise. And if you guys are in our military space, he also participates and helps with that, along with Dr. Lay. Okay, so now we are going to jump in to our agenda. Welcome again. And we did our introductions. Today, we are going to talk about School of Origin, as well as School of Origin transportation, services, and then resources to support transportation. Like there is so much that goes on with transportation. And then we're going to give you all the general reminders for how to get on to our listserv, all of our upcoming opportunities. So we look forward to going through that with you guys. And I'm going to let Dr. Lay get into some of the housekeeping for how to participate in this webinar.
Yes, so a little bit of housekeeping. If you've noticed, I've been dropping in the chat. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and a copy of our presentation will be available on the Techi web portal under our professional development site. After this webinar, it usually takes a couple days to process. So look for it starting next week. And as always, make sure you are subscribed to our listserv. That is how we provide the announcements that resources are available, and you can keep up to date with all our information. The chat function and the Q&A function is open for this webinar. Our chat, we ask that your comments and your general feedback be provided in the chat function. Our Q&A is reserved for questions that you would like for us to answer. And we want to preface that as we appreciate all the questions that will be coming in, but we would love to get through the content. So we will try our very best to answer as many questions as possible. But you can always send in your questions to our homeless education inbox. You will receive CPE credits if you participate in at minimum 60 minutes of our webinar, and then you will receive that through the email after our attendance is processed.
I am just so curious if our participants, if some of you guys can drop in the chat the link to our Techi web portal. So if you have it open or you know how to get to it, just want to see if you guys can drop that into the chat for us. We'd love to make it as collaborative as possible. Thank you guys for doing some IT to help folks here on the Zoom webinar. Love the collaborative spirit and the support through the chat feature. As Dr. Lay said, if you have any questions in particular that you would like us to address, please, please, please put them in the Q&A feature on your Zoom. We don't always catch it all in the chat. We like to leave the chat open for open dialogue and communication and tips and tricks. Oh, look at that. Look at all these folks putting in the Techi website. I knew you guys had it. Good job. Appreciate y'all. So I always say this is what I did as a McKinney-Vento liaison for 5 years. I always say copy the chat. Like if you see really good content in that chat, really good tips and tricks, like we drop links in there. Folks drop different information points to there as we talk through things. So I say copy the things that work for you, have a Word document open or a Google Doc, and save all that info. All right, guys, we are ready to jump in. Everyone's favorite topic, School of Origin. I love this. So McKinney-Vento law is very nuanced. I always tell everybody this is a very niche law, and you're going to be explaining to administrators and to folks across the school district, School of Origin, and a lot of folks are like, what is that and what does it mean? And how do I explain that? And so in this webinar, we are going to dive into School of Origin because it is the foundational piece before we get into those transportation services. All right, so we're going to start directly from the McKinney-Vento Act. Really want you guys, if you are able to put the McKinney-Vento law, that link for how to get straight to the law, if somebody will drop that in the chat, we would love that. If you guys can't find it, no worries, I will drop it in there. So the term School of Origin from the McKinney-Vento law means the school that a child or youth attended when permanently housed. So that is one potential School of Origin option. School of Origin sounds like it could just be one school, but it's actually multiple, and it really depends case by case. When you are looking at, thank you, Mary Lou, for dropping the McKinney-Vento Act in there. When you're looking at School of Origin in different scenarios, as you're working with your students and your families, they could potentially have more than one School of Origin or just one School of Origin. So that kind of gets confusing, and we're going to break it down for you guys. So the term School of Origin, first option would be the school in which the child or youth attended when permanently housed. So that is the school in which they lost their housing. Or that or is a second option, or the school in which the child or youth was last enrolled. There are some instances where you could have one school be where they lost their housing, and they also have a school that they enrolled in when they lost their housing, attending the attendance area school. If you guys want to pop in the chat, if you've ever experienced that where you have a student who has multiple School of Origins, would love to just kind of get a pulse check on how many folks have experienced that. For me, that was definitely a few times a week that we would see that. It also includes the designated receiving school at the next grade level for all feeder schools. And so that is going to be all the time, all the time. I thought so. Thank you, Molly and Greg, for confirming that. Definitely you're going to see this. So when you're getting to your end of the school year, we're in the spring, it's going to come faster than we think. You're going to see this next grade level for a longer duration of homelessness. It's going to include those transition years. So it's going to be 5th grade to 6th grade for middle school, depending on what your elementary to middle school feeder pattern is, as well as 8th grade to 9th grade. So keep that in mind, that you can have a student who will need this part of the law where they are able to attend the designated receiving school based off their School of Origin address. And always want to reiterate, if you have something that comes up for School of Origin and you're not really sure, you can always reach out to your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison for any technical assistance questions that come up for this. This is the first part of the law, and it gives you those 3 options of what School of Origin can look like. All right, so as the McKinney-Vento liaison, you are federally designated in this role to assist with helping with School of Origin as you're looking at it. So first and foremost, you are doing where it all starts with immediate enrollment. And I do want to start off with that. Whenever you have a student who identifies on your student residency questionnaire, also lovingly known as the SRQ, as experiencing homelessness, you do immediate enrollment, and then you identify your students as a liaison from that SRQ if they're experiencing homelessness in collaboration with school personnel. This could be your registrar, you could identify them from transportation, cafeteria services, counselors, whoever your points of contact are. Anybody and everybody eventually, as you're doing that identification, will fill out a student residency questionnaire and come across your desk as a McKinney-Vento liaison. So that's why we have in collaboration with school personnel. Now, the other part where you have other organizations and agencies is really going to be a local context for you. This could be motels and hotels that you're working with where you have posters posted. This could be shelters. This could be agencies, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, mentoring programs, just depending on who you collaborate and what that community collaboration looks like. If you guys work with shelters, motel, hotels, or any organizations, if you want to go ahead and throw that in the chat so people can get an idea of what school personnel you're working with, which organizations and agencies, I think that's always helpful to kind of tease that out. And then people will be like, oh yeah, we also have that in our area. That's a good person for us to collaborate to help identify students experiencing homelessness. I know a few of our ESCs also do billboards to help with identification. So if you have billboards that are in your region to help with identification of students experiencing homelessness, you can also put that in the chat. I'm only one and we're only a team of 3, so we don't have all of those. So if you guys want to put some of those ideas, we definitely appreciate that. As liaison, you also need to ensure that students experiencing homelessness are enrolled and provided equitable access to succeed in school. And that's going to look different across all of our different school districts for that support. You're also going to want to ensure that your families and students have access to educational services for which they are eligible. Now, when you're working with school of origin, and as we delve into transportation, it can be very tricky in trying to do after school tutoring. It can be tricky to do UIL, sports, and trying to think of like CTE. Like there's so many different programs and resources that we have across the state. So if you guys have any tips and tricks that you have for assisting with transportation for before and after school activities, if you could pop that in the chat for folks, that would be much appreciated. We also, as liaisons, have a duty to inform our parents, guardians, and unaccompanied youth of all transportation services available, including our school of origin transportation. So how you do that communication can be through an email, it can be through a phone call. When I was a liaison at the district level, I always made sure that I had that inside of my script when I was talking to my parents to tell them about their school of origin transportation, because it could be different modes of transportation, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And you also have to realize that when you're dealing with transportation, it's important to have those dispatch numbers for your families so that they can call if anything is going on with transportation. Just some tips and tricks as we go through this. You also want to make sure that you're providing school personnel, professional development, and supports to ensure identification for students experiencing homelessness, and cast a very wide net for how you do that training. All right, guys, I know I gave you a lot for what the liaison is doing, so let's jump in and see how we can approach this. So the McKinney-Vento identification process, as I said, starts with that immediate enrollment first. So your registrars and your school office staff will enroll the student. They will fill out that beginning of the year paperwork, welcome packet, however you guys do it for your enrollment practices. Inside of there, you have a student residency questionnaire that you're including. And that student residency questionnaire is an opportunity for students that are could be unaccompanied youth, not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. It can also be the families filling that out. So the student residency questionnaire is a place where families can self-identify if they are experiencing homelessness. And then after that SRQ, it will go over to the McKinney-Vento liaison, where they will start to do that intake process. All right, so provisional school enrollment looks like this. So you enroll the student with provisional school enrollment, and then you proceed with the record request. And after you have the information that you need, you do the intake process to determine eligibility for McKinney-Vento. Students experiencing homelessness cannot be identified for McKinney-Vento program services if they're not enrolled in school. So the first step is always to do that immediate enrollment. A parent or legal guardian who is enrolling the student has up to 30 days from the date of enrollment to provide the proof of the student's identity. We waive having those initial, this is the immediate provisional enrollment, having those school records. And commonly you use T-Rex to do a records request to gather those records. I know that was like 80% of it. When we didn't have all those school records, we relied on T-Rex. If you guys use T-Rex very often, you can pop that in the chat to get the school records that we were needing to help a student provide those school records. Oftentimes, there can also be appointments that need to be made as you are looking at vital records. So birth certificates, any kind of enrollment paperwork, there's driver license, there's a lot of different approaches. So if you have a student that is enrolling in a family that is enrolling and they've moved from a place and they don't have any of that paperwork and they're not coming from Texas, and you're like, how do I proceed with this? Just make sure that you know that you can always reach out to your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison, and you do take it on case by case. This is a time where you can really work with your registrars to make sure, like, hey, are you able to call that other school in another state or another country to make sure that we can get the records that we need? You're also, as liaison, it's important for you to provide that wraparound support for how do they get their birth certificate, what's the process for that, and assisting with them with connecting with those community entities to make sure that they are able to get all the stuff that they need. So when we're looking at provisional enrollment with incomplete school records, TREX is what we just said is what's commonly used. With TREX and students experiencing homelessness, there is a 10 working day expedited thing for students experiencing homelessness. So it's always helpful to remind our registrars of that within 10 working days. You can also reach out to the fellow McKinney-Vento liaison that is at the other school district if you're trying to get records and get some support. Some examples of records that are included in this request can be your Texas unique ID, date of birth, current grade level, social security number, and your immunization information. All right. So students experiencing homelessness may attend. So this is where we really break up those different opportunities of what that looks like in Texas. I really love this slide, and I think it's very important as a McKinney-Vento liaison that you have this so that you are able to share this as you're doing your trainings and also while you're explaining. These are the 4 options for students experiencing homelessness may attend in the state of Texas. So the first one is the public school the student attended when permanently housed, or the school the student was last enrolled, which comes directly from the McKinney-Vento Act that we just went over. And the second option is the school of origin includes a designated receiving school at the next grade level for all feeder schools. The recording, Anna, will be on our website, and we will also send that notification once it's been approved. And then the third option is going to be the zone public school in the attendance area where the student is residing. Now, this option for the zone public school in the attendance area, that is the most common way that all students enroll. And so students experiencing homelessness are also able to enroll in their attendance school if that's where they want to attend. That's up to the parent or the guardian's discretion or unaccompanied youth. And then in Texas, we have a Texas specific rule, which is why we have the little Texas hanging out there on this option. This is probably the one we see a lot of technical assistance for. Any school district in Texas, campus, it's any school district in Texas, not the campus, is to be selected by the McKinney-Vento liaison and administration in collaboration with the family. So this works much like a transfer because transportation does not have to be included with this Texas specific law. If a family is zoned or their school of origin is in another school district, but they want to attend a different school district anywhere in Texas, they are able to attend any district in Texas if they're experiencing homelessness, and the liaison works with your campuses as well as the family to find a few options depending on the grade level, how many students are in the family, but they are able to attend any school district in Texas. Upon enrollment and during the intake process, the McKinney-Vento liaison will assist with campus determination. And really that is just like this umbrella to really wrap around these 4 options that you could encounter as a McKinney-Vento liaison when you're looking at a zoned, or I don't want to say zone school, when you're looking at school of origin options, feeder school options from school of origin, zoned attendance area school, and also if they are going for the Texas law that lets them, as a family experiencing homelessness, enroll in any school district in Texas. Whew, that's a mouthful, and there's so many options and so many nuances. Wanted to make sure we captured all of the options for you guys on one slide. All right, so when we're looking at best practices, we have on our website, and we will pop that in the chat for you guys, a sample student residency questionnaire. Now, this has all of the good information for what you need to include in your student residency questionnaire so that families are able to identify. If you embed this process as part of like online enrollment, that is totally fine, just as long as you have some way of providing families with a sample student residency questionnaire, much like you do the form for home language survey for EB, or you do different services for that welcome packet. This is for the McKinney-Vento federal law obligation of allowing families to complete a student residency questionnaire. If you have any questions about that, as always, please feel free to reach out to your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison or our homeless education inbox. The sample student residency questionnaire that we're providing for you that Dr. Lay just dropped in the chat is a best practice to determine McKinney-Vento eligibility. It also documents the school of origin. It also documents the current living situation for the family. And SRQs can be completed throughout the school year. In fact, we highly recommend doing that and letting your counselors and your registrars know. This really helps out, especially in an unaccompanied youth situation and for any families. But if there's some kind of displacement, natural disaster, the parent or guardian is not there, so they're not in the physical custody of their parent or guardian, providing a student residency questionnaire can be helpful so that that student or the family can receive McKinney-Vento services. And as we know, any of the cases that can drop somebody into experiencing homelessness can happen at any moment. So it's important to really note that SRQs can be completed throughout the school year. It's not just at enrollment, and it's not just at the beginning of the school year. And just because I'm curious, I just kind of want to see how many of you guys embed your student residency questionnaire, your SRQ, as part of your online enrollment process. If you'll just confirm that for us, that would be really awesome. Oh, look at that. So many do. Oh, yes. We got thumbs up. We got yeses. That's great. The electronic system makes it really, really easy. And then if you also have a paper of the SRQ for your unaccompanied youth, that's also a best practice because in working with unaccompanied youth, that can be a really touchy subject. So you want to make sure that they're meeting with their counselor and that they feel really secure. Whenever I did the intake process, which is what we're doing right here, I always did that in person with my unaccompanied youth. How many of you guys meet in person with your unaccompanied youth? Look at that. Look at all these best practices across the state. You guys could be running this webinar. I'm positive of it. All right. So what does the intake form look like? You clarify the responses that are on that SRQ. You also document the school of origin, which could be any of those options that we talked about previously. And you identify all the students. So it could be a family of 5. It could be a family of 6. There was many times, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, where you have one registrar who's maybe been in the school district for like 5-10 years, and they are the ones that alert you with the student residency questionnaire. But you don't know that there's like 2 siblings, or you don't know that there's a family of 5. So when you're doing that intake process, it also gives you an opportunity to make sure that you are capturing the entire family, and then you're able to pull the SRQ if the other family members, the other students happen to go to different schools within your school district. So that helps you really identify all the students in the family through that intake process to make sure you don't have any coding errors for your families. And I don't know if you guys know this, but this was a really awesome trick that I learned a few years into being a McKinney-Vento liaison. Your PEIMS person at your school district is actually able typically to run a report that will show you any coding errors that you have from McKinney-Vento. So we would use that report to see like, oh, I coded one student in the family as a 2 doubled up and the other student is a 4. Is that correct? So it was a great way for us to check between our PEIMS coordinator as well as our McKinney-Vento department to make sure that we were on the same page with our families. And it really went back to this sample intake form and process. It's a best practice as you're going through it. Not sure if you guys use reports to check your coding. If you do, pop that in the chat. If that's something new for you, definitely coordinate with your PEIMS care coordinator to make sure that you're implementing that practice. We are also, oh, awesome. Stanley and Debbie, you're confirming it for me. On Data Suite, Elevate has it. Thanks, Freddie. And we work closely with PEIMS. Very cool. Wendy, nice. Great. I love hearing that, guys. That's super awesome. We're also going to drop in the chat this sample intake form that we have on our website. All right. And then this is my favorite part. Like I love this part when you're doing it, is to go over all the different program services that you have in your area. So what does your district provide? And I always say you start off with those federal rights that any student experiencing homelessness across the state of Texas is able to get. That's going to be your free school meals. This is going to also be just even having the ability to stay enrolled at your school of origin. These are those big federal rights that I love going through with the parents and the unaccompanied youth to let them know, yes, the security and the stability of staying in that school, as well as getting meal services. And our school district, we also provided wraparound food support to kind of combat that food insecurity. So pop in the chat if you guys also do weekend food packs or supplemental snacks at your campuses and your districts to help your students with that. And any of those ideas are always much appreciated. So if you do like, what is in that food pack? And I kind of break into that as we do other webinars. So I won't get into that. Yay, look at all the weekend food packs. Just a little trick on the weekend food packs. If you have your students open it up, because they're always going to say thank you, be grateful, but they may not have food that they eat. And so to kind of combat food that was going to get thrown away, because you don't want that, I would have the students open up the weekend food pack. And if there was anything that they didn't want, we just had them put it inside, like give it back to us, and we made it a pantry. That was also a way for us to develop a pantry. So just some tips and tricks as you're going through that. And I love, Wendy, thank you. You're dropping in Seeds of Love, and I'm also seeing Junior Leagues. This is what I'm talking about when you really want to copy from the chat. You may have some of these already in your area. And then Regina dropped in, I love this for a food pantry, www.findhelp.org is a great way to start looking into that. And I also want to say your regional McKinney-Vento folks also have local community resources. And so you can also work with them to do a link to their website for additional resources that may not be in your school district, but are provided regionally. That can also be a tip or trick when you're looking at that. So as you're going through this intake form, you're really doing a comprehensive overview of like, what is federally provided, what is provided within your school district. This would be the time to go through like, do you need online tutoring support? Do you need after school tutoring? Do you need any academic supports? Like if a student is in CTV or CTE or in advanced math, do they need a graphing calculator? Like there are different ways to look at school supplies based off the programs and AP, IB, depending on what our students are in. So I always made it a point to ask the students, is there any particular school supplies that you need? And I always figured that maybe students were a little bit like me. Sometimes like as you're going through these program services is where you learn like they need a sweater. So I always made sure I had on hand a black hoodie because that could work for any of my students from all the way from pre-K all the way to high school. Everybody loves a black hoodie that has nothing on it, can zip up very easily. Couldn't always convince the boys to do coats for kids, but the black hoodie was always definitely something that worked out really well. So there's just like a few staples that you can have on hand. And as you're doing this intake process and you're giving this comprehensive overview, it also lets you know exactly what your students and families need and allows you to build like what care package you're going to do. And that could be as simple as doing an email that captures all the different resources and services that are in the area that they need, setting up an immunization appointment with Department of Health and Human Services if they're missing some kind of records request, or that was a way for me to document and make a checklist with me and the family. So I was providing them all of the community wraparound support referral information that they needed, as well as if we had anything on hand in our resource center. And that's really that second portion of documenting referrals and services provided. So I would do that on my intake form, which ended up populating into a spreadsheet. So I had that list, but I also did it as an email so that would be a direct communication with the families so that they could have that to work off of. A lot of our families also have housing insecurity and don't have a place to stay. So that is exactly where I put community resources for housing experts that were in the community. You also need to make sure that you're documenting non-qualification criteria and intake notes. Whenever you do a D&Q, which is documenting non-qualification, you want to make sure that you're also doing an email that supports that they do not qualify in case there is a complaint or grievance that is brought up as part of the dispute process. For more information on that part of it, I really encourage you, if you have not already, we have a McKinney-Vento 101 recording that goes through that and 201 for what that looks like. Of course, if you have any questions, about like that documentation for D&Q, noting it here on the intake process, as well as sending an email to the families of why they don't qualify, as well as how they can do a grievance or a complaint in your school district, providing that process under McKinney-Vento federal law as a requirement. Any questions you have around doing that, please reach out to your ESC McKinney-Vento liaisons. Woo! Intake forms, so much fun. There's so much things that you can do. So also in reviewing with your families, make sure that you are reviewing School of Origin services. This can look different for every single school. I really love to have these icons on here because you might be checking different things. They could be in the walk zone. So they could, like, there are many times when they don't qualify for School of Origin transportation because that's not what School of Origin transportation is. It is really if they're living outside of the attendance area transportation. So typically, let's just say generically, you have about 100 students experiencing homelessness. You'll generally see 15% needing School of Origin transportation. So that's about 15 students. Of course, that varies across school districts. It can be totally different. And it can vary just even in the time of year. I remember, there was a time when we were transporting 300 students, but we only had 500 identified. So it can vary, but just something to think about. Not all of them will qualify for School of Origin transportation because they may live in the net zone, which is within 2 miles of walking distance, which is what a lot of our school districts have, and transportation departments will remind you of. And then you could have a white fleet, which would be your district transportation. That could be a car or a van or a bus, or they could be a part of a regular city school bus route, depending on where you're at. So it's important while you're doing the intake process as the liaison to let your parents, guardians, and unaccompanied youth know what services are available and what that looks like for them. There may be instances where they don't want a bus pass for their students. So they may want to do the attendance area school district instead, where there's a different transportation that's being provided. So when you're looking at that, just make sure you're letting them know if it's going to be a car that has like the school district information on there that's going to be picking up their student. So School of Origin transportation can look different depending on your school district, as you guys know, but it might be completely different for a new family experiencing homelessness dipping into transportation services. Also, provide information on your School of Origin transportation requests. Make sure that they know the timeline. A lot of times, families get used to, and schools get used to this too, so letting your school personnel know that a family will bring their student in to enroll in the morning and they're on an afternoon bus. That is not how it goes for School of Origin transportation. There could be a timeline. It could be 3 to 5 business days, depending on what your school district is. So making sure that they know to get set up on transportation may take a longer time, especially when you're working with another school district to provide that transportation. And then communicate the arranged transportation. So I always included that in the email right at the intake process along with their services, so they knew exactly, we were all on the same page with what that looked like. And Lenore, I see you have a question. If you will pop that into the Q&A, we are coming up very shortly on the pause and process. Thank you, Lenore. So I'm going to grab that question and I'm going to trust that you're putting it in the Q&A. So we've got School of Origin request is only when they leave.
So I'm going to merge, Dr. Vitamontes, I'm going to merge a couple of questions regarding the same thing.
Perfect. Even better. Okay. Go ahead.
So on the slide that you had where we had that Texas icon and there was a bus with the, yes, that one right there with that one marked out. So the question is, why is the bus on that last slide crossed out? Transportation isn't provided. And the follow-up to that is, if the student has School of Origin but decides to attend the school close to where they are living now or in the city they moved to, we don't have to provide transportation. I thought we were required to provide it or work with other city to provide it. And then that also follows Lenore's question of School of Origin requests is only for when they leave outside our school district or within the school district or both. Merging 2 of them, 3 of them.
You are, that's great. I don't. Whew. So I'm just going to start off by saying that whenever you're looking at school of origin, and I just want to reiterate this, like you really need to take it case by case. That's the easiest way to approach this, guys. So when you're looking at all these different four options, this last one in particular that we're looking at, this is a Texas specific law. This isn't along with the federal law. So in this last one, in the Texas Education Code, a student experiencing homelessness can attend any school district in Texas. So this is a separate option from school of origin or zoned. So each of these you have to take as an option of what a family may be asking for. In this last option, and let's say that you have a student, let's say Zoe, for instance. Zoe and her family, they live in Plano, but they want to attend Dallas ISD and they're living in a shelter. So they are allowed to attend Dallas ISD because they are experiencing homelessness under the Texas Education Code. They do not have to be provided transportation if that is how they are enrolling in that school district. Let's say, for instance, that Zoe does not have school of origin for Dallas ISD. They're not in the attendance area for Dallas ISD, so they don't meet these first three requirements. Like you have the first two from the federal law. And then you have the third one, which is an option for every student. So if they don't meet these three and they're enrolling in your school district based off of the Texas law, that school district does not have to provide transportation. Now, if you're a school district, and I've seen it go both ways, if you're a school district that's not able to offer transportation for whatever reason, that could be important for you in that instance. If you are a school district that can provide transportation services, let's say you have a bus pass, and it's free, so it doesn't cost anything, you're able to provide transportation to remove that barrier to attend your schools. That can also be an option if you want to follow the McKinney-Vento law that way. Now, of course, if you have a specific question about this, it could, when you're telling the information and we're going through it together or with your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison, it could be that they qualify for school of origin and they have to be provided transportation, which is going to be the first three options where transportation is provided. I will say that there is not going to be, yes, you do, even if every charter school in Texas is a public school and they do have to provide transportation. So we can get very nuanced with this very quickly. And I will say it is case by case, but this is a Texas specific law. And when you have those questions, please make sure if you're working through it to contact your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison. And if they're like, if they're not able to help or it's like too nuanced with that, then they will send it to us at TEA and we will get you an answer. Cool. Great question, and a very common one. We see that as technical assistants all the time. Now, I'm also seeing reimbursement. A couple of you guys are putting in that, and I'm grabbing it from the chat, which I said we're going to go from Q&A, but that's okay because I'm seeing it. So how does reimbursement work? That depends on your transportation department, and that I really say is a local decision. So you really do need to work with your transportation department and also with your network of other ESC McKinney-Vento liaisons for how they do it. All right. John, did you see another question that we can do, or is that it for now?
I think we're good right now.
Perfect. Okay. So I will take one more. Annette put in here, what if the family is an hour and a half away and wants to attend with little ones? Most of our contract car services cannot stop for bathroom breaks. Huge liability. Annette, you're bringing up a very good question. And I would say it is definitely case by case. So when you are looking at it and you have a student, like defining little one, right? Like you could have a student that is in elementary, and a lot of us think of it as a little one. A fifth grader is much different from a pre-K student, right? So really you're doing that best interest conversation with the family to see how it can work. I had cases where they lived an hour and a half away and they still attended their school of origin and we could make it work, especially if it was like a short term and it helped with school stability. So I will say with this, there's not going to be one answer. It really is going to come down to where the family is staying, how you're providing that transportation, how you're working outside of the box to remove those barriers to education, how long they're anticipating staying there. I've seen it go both ways in a best interest conversation, which is why it's really instrumental to have that best interest determination and go through all of their options with the family. I've also seen it where it's routed, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this as well, where you route a transportation and the parent is like, that's too long. We don't want this transportation. So put a yes if you've experienced that. You go through all of this to do a transportation request and you communicate with that with the family. And then all of a sudden the family's like, nope, we don't want to do that. So it happens all the time, and really a few times a month, Lauren. Yep, I feel you. That happened all the time. Or you set up the transportation. If any of you guys have experienced this, you set up the transportation and they've moved to another location. Has anybody experienced that where you have it set up and then they're at a different location? There's a lot of different situations that can come up. And so what I say is, like, you do those best interest conversations, you really work with the families. There is not a magic time of being on a bus or a magic number. It really depends on nuances and case by case with your students and families, what's going to be in the best interest of that particular family in your school district for them to attend school. So that's just one way to look at that. Even if your charter school does not provide transportation under federal McKinney-Vento law, if you have a student experiencing homelessness and they are outside of the attendance area for school of origin, you do have to provide transportation. And Katrina, you can send this question into your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison, as well as the homeless education inbox. Julio, you're asking a great question, and we're actually coming up on that. So we're going to save that as we get into our school of origin transportation services. So we just covered school of origin and all the different ways that it can be school of origin. Your students are enrolled. Kind of why do we do this for transportation? Because this is, I don't know if you guys get that question from school personnel, but every day I was having to answer, why are we doing this? Why are they not just attending their zone school? Has anybody else had pushback from their school district personnel where they're like, why don't they just attend where they're, yes, okay. Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, thank you, Maria. Yep, there we go. So students, this is the why behind that. And I love this quote. And so as you're explaining it, I had pulled this quote when I was a liaison to share with school personnel. This is why we do school of origin. This is really the heart of why it's in our federal law. Oh, Lauren, you're hitting me right. Yes, all the time, especially when they have behavior problems. Lauren, we're having our 401 is going to be about discipline, and we're going to get into that topic too. And I'm so excited for you guys to be able to sign up for that opportunity. All right, so getting to the why. Students experiencing homelessness are 3 times more likely than their housed peers to transfer schools in the middle of the year because their frequent moves result in the choice to either travel a long distance to stay in their original school or change to a closer one. And this is exactly what our students are facing. Every time a student switches schools, they lose a month of schooling. Even if they withdraw on a Friday afternoon and enroll on a Monday morning, you're still losing a month of school because all of our school districts are different, and the business of school and what school looks like is totally different for our students. That's why we have the transition assistance toolkit. Dr. Lay, if you'll pop that in there, they have to start over at another school. That's why they say it's like a month. So in looking at that, this is why. You can also give personal stories as you're a McKinney-Vento liaison and you're talking to school personnel. I had a student that was both foster care and McKinney-Vento. They were in a child without placement, and they had been enrolled in 21 schools within 1 month. 21 schools. They had never even set foot inside of a school. That is like, that there's a range of that. But more commonly than anything else, and you'll see this in your school of origin transportation all of the time, you will have families moving to 3 locations, 5 locations. I remember one year with a family, they had 20 different moves as they stayed with different family friends, shelters, motels. It changed all the time. And so the constant for our students, when you're highly mobile like this and you're experiencing homelessness, the constant and the home and the place that they feel safe and secure is with their peers and their teachers. And so education provides that opportunity for school stability. And it's super important to explain this to all school personnel so that they are on board with understanding why we do school of origin transportation, why we navigate having, like, if the family lives an hour away or an hour and a half away, what that looks like, and why the best interest determination is so important, and can be so difficult when families are faced with those options. So school stability challenges, and we've hit on a few of these, is navigating travel and transportation to one's original school from a new starting point can be very difficult. Changing schools involves losing supportive relationships, not only with your friends that are at school, but also your teachers. Maybe all of us had different folks that we gravitated toward in school. If you guys want to, you can put in there, I'll go ahead and say mine. Like, there's usually like one person that you remember from when you were going to school, maybe even made like the whole difference to you of why you became a teacher. For me, it was Miss Schmidt. She was one of my favorite teachers, and probably why I became a teacher and got into education in the first place. And so this happens for our students too. They're losing out on their favorite teacher or counselor, any personnel that they work with. Like, that's just something that happens. And so staying, keeping that school stability and staying in your school of origin is very important, not only to keep the supportive relationship of your peers and your friends, but also with those adults and those relationships that you make inside of the school building. Adjusting to a new environment. I will never forget the day that I had a senior who had an accident because nobody had showed him where the bathroom was, and had to get him new clothes and had to tell him, you know what, it's totally fine. And then also just working with our high schools of, like, go through when you have a new student and make sure that you're showing them where the bathroom is, counselors, how to reach out to the liaison, how to go through the school line. Also, a common problem with students, and this could be from pre-K all the way up through my seniors, was they didn't eat for a week or 2 weeks because they didn't know how. They didn't know how to do it, or what their new number was, or what that looked like in the school district. Thank you, Carissa. You put in Miss Smith for you. That's awesome. So mine was Miss Schmidt. Hers was Miss Smith. And then you got to work with her when you became an educator. I think that's amazing. So just like we have those personal relationships, our students have those personal relationships, but they also can have academic setbacks when they go to a new school. They may not know where the bathroom is. They may not know how to get meals. And those are basics. They could also not know how to access tutoring. Different teachers have different tutoring schedules. Some school districts offer online tutoring support. We did. Other school districts don't. Like, you have to go in person. And so any of those can create academic setbacks, create educational discontinuity. In addition to, not only that, it's like an additional layer of also experiencing homelessness. So school stability and staying at your school of origin really helps to negate that, and really helps the families really focus on what's important, which is, how do we get out of homelessness, which should be the focus, and how they're doing it. Also, changing schools can greatly impede students' academic and social growth, and predisposes many youth experiencing homelessness to significant academic challenges and the risk of dropping out of school. So because of this, the McKinney-Vento Act requires school districts to maintain educational stability through the school of origin to the extent that it is feasible. It doesn't always work out. Like, looking in the chat, there may have been an instance where there was a pre-K student for an hour and a half travel time that didn't work for that student. But it could also be where you have a junior, and an hour and a half for them to finish high school could be the difference between them graduating or dropping out. And this isn't in here, but it's important to note, the top 2 feeders into adult homelessness are students that were experiencing homelessness as youth, as well as students that are in foster care. So just something for you to know. These slides in this section are very important to share with your school personnel as you're doing the training of why we do school of origin, and why it's in the best interest of our students. So when you're doing the best interest determination, this is from the McKinney-Vento Act. This is stuff that I would copy for, like, why we're doing school of origin. Where is this coming from? It's the federal law. And really, best interest is really to help the child or youth and the LEA, like the school district McKinney-Vento liaison, to the extent feasible, to keep that student in their school of origin where they lost housing for continuity of schooling. And there is that caveat, except when doing so is in contrary to the wishes of the child or youth, parent, or guardian. So It is always up to the unaccompanied youth or the parent or guardian if they want to stay in the school of origin. That is their option. As always, providing a written explanation, including a statement regarding the right to appeal to the homeless child or youth's parent or guardian if the LEA sends such child or youth to a school other than the school of origin or a school requested by the parent or guardian. So that is if there is like a grievance, you make sure that you include what the grievance process is along with your determination of why you've come to that determination that you have. The McKinney-Vento liaison provides assistance to unaccompanied youth in consideration of their views for placement and enrollment under subparagraph. So when I'm looking at this and doing the best interest determination, you're really doing a balancing act as a McKinney-Vento liaison and working with your students and families, as well as your school district for what is going to be best for that student in continuing their educational journey. So this slide is really looking at what are those considerations? What could come up? So really, in some of the examples that we've gone through, age of the student can play a factor, travel time can play a factor, personal safety issues, as we had in that question, like there's not a bathroom break, like how do like that create safety issues for that student? Time of the school year can also play a factor when you're looking at that. Like if it's the beginning of the year, the family is going to stay living with an aunt or an uncle for the duration of the school year. Maybe the attendance area school is actually better. It's going to save them time in the long run. As far as like travel time to and from the school of origin, or it could be a short placement. Other considerations can be student programs, special education, gifted and talented. They may have a deep relationship with the program or trying to get a diploma or a certificate. And I have this big because it is big. It's important to really consider this and ask the families, how long are you anticipated of staying at that shelter, the hotel, or with that family? All of these factors really come in as considerations as you're helping them make that determination. Ultimately, this is going to be up to the parent to do that. So school of origin transportation is requested by the parent, guardian, or unaccompanied youth during the intake process. And also going over what the school of origin transportation options are. They are a highly mobile group, so just letting them know a way for them to connect with you to request transportation. The McKinney-Vento liaison communicates school of origin to designated transportation contacts. So it's always pivotal and a great process to have a transportation point of contact for however many students you're transporting. They can become your best friend in transportation as you're going through that. Also, making sure that the transportation route is set up and busing information is provided to the parent, guardian, or unaccompanied youth by the designated LEA contact. And then setting up follow-up with the parent, guardian, or unaccompanied youth to confirm busing information and monitor transportation services. I know this feels like a very overwhelming slide of how you do the request process. So I am going to hand it over to John to go over how you can do this request process with our best practice sample letter. All right, so John, go ahead.
So you will need to provide the family with a school of origin transportation letter. This transportation letter does need to include the student information, the busing information. The busing information should include the pickup time and location, the bus number, and also a contact number if services won't be needed that day. You need to have a no-call guidance included in the letter, and also the McKinney-Vento transportation the McKinney-Vento contact information, the contact information, and we do have a link to the letter in the chat.
All right, guys, I know nobody as a McKinney-Vento liaison has ever experienced their families not even calling or not canceling transportation. So you've never had no call, no shows. Just kidding. I'm sure you've had that. Yeah. So if you want to pop that in the chat, if you've ever experienced that, so this is why having this transportation letter is very, very important. Making sure that whatever your district policy is, and we have this here as a sample, you can take it, you can reformat it, you can make it your own. This is just good guidance of what you can do, but letting parents know at the forefront, like, hey, if you don't call after 3 times, like we have on the sample letter, and we don't hear from you, we need to drop you from our transportation and you'll have to start the process over. Only because school of origin transportation is very expensive for school districts. Give a thumbs up if it is expensive for your school district to provide school of origin transportation. As a liaison, you have to balance that. So it's very reasonable to do, oh man, yep. I see a flying money in there in the middle. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. It's very important to communicate that at the forefront with your parents, be open and transparent, having a transportation letter that you copy inside of like to your families. I even made sure that I included this with the transportation department. Our transportation department would include this in their correspondence when they sent out the email once the transportation had been routed. So they knew exactly what to expect. So this is very important as you are a McKinney-Vento liaison, balancing your district resources, as well as if a family's not using that transportation, there's usually other families that also need that transportation, and it can shorten your queue or your timeline for getting them routed. And I will also say, just as a best practice and tip, your transportation department also runs reports. And so they have ways to monitor that. So it wasn't uncommon for my transportation contact, my router, to send me an email and say, hey, we have these 4 families that haven't been showing up. Can you reach out to them to see if they still need this transportation? And I promise you half the time they had moved to a different location. So it's very important to make sure you have those processes and procedures in place within your school district to make sure that you're being as cautious and careful with your district money as possible. But it also could be that they moved and that's why they didn't call or show up and they just need that extra support. All right, so as you're looking at this, kind of just encapsulating everything. So when can school of origin services be requested? They can be requested, 1, upon identification, or anytime during the school year. They could send you an email or do a phone call. We had Google Voice, and so I would even get text messages from my unaccompanied youth. Miss, I've moved. So like I need to get picked up from here. However, they're doing that, whatever communication style you've worked out with your students and your families. If you haven't tried text messages with your unaccompanied youth, I definitely recommend it. It was a game changer for us in our program and getting responses from our unaccompanied youth. All right, so you can also do it if they did not initially qualify for school of origin services during the initial intake. Let's say that they were living with the family that was in the walk zone, but then they moved out of the attendance area. Now they need transportation services. Make sure you say, hey, this is, please communicate when you need transportation services. If you move out of the area, we do provide this service, and you do that at the intake. And that could be due to a change of living situation. So you could be saying 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 are really helping at the same time. Yes, Karen, very important. That's why I said Google Text is part of like your school district, not your personal phone number. Texting does work with parents too. Thank you, Diana, for putting that in there. But yes, never use your personal cell phone. That is definitely a best practice. Thank you guys for putting that in the chat. And Google Text, if you have Google services in your school district, is not that costly to add on to that. But that, of course, is a local determination, which means that's a local decision. These are just tips and tricks from being liaisons that are in the chat, as well as myself as a former liaison. All right. So request process, like 1, develop an intake process to assess and document school of origin transportation services upon enrollment and during the school year. We used a form that populated into a spreadsheet so that we were capturing every single person that we were doing our school of origin transportation services for. That worked out really well for us. If you guys have different methods that you do this, go ahead and pop that into the chat. It's always good to do information sharing, especially while you're in a webinar. We can always learn from one another. And the second one, develop a process to submit and monitor school of origin transportation requests and services. So not only with your intake process, but also with your school of origin transportation requests. I had so many spreadsheets going and so many forms going that what I ended up doing was I had all of my forms connect to one spreadsheet, and the tabs would be, this is transfer, this is intake. Well, actually, tab 1 was SRQs that we did online that was offered on our website. That could be accessed anytime during the school year, as well as our school online enrollment process. Then the second tab was our intakes. The third tab was our transportation, and we shared that with transportation, going through like FERPA and confidentiality things. So that depends on your school district. That was just one approach. So I could walk into the office, I could open up one spreadsheet, and whatever call I was taking, I knew exactly where to go to. Then you also have, oh, Roxanne, I would love to share the spreadsheet, but I can't because it had all that confidential information. I'm no longer with that district. I do love that you guys are putting that in there. If you got, Roxanne, if you will help me out and send an email to the homeless education inbox, and we'll see how we can connect that for you guys. And I think I saw Anne in this chat. Anne Grisham, if you were on this, if you feel like you can share just like that blank spreadsheet. Well, first let's check. Anne, do you still have that spreadsheet? Do you still use that? Like, and if you do and you're willing to share, you can pop that in the chat. Roxanne is like, that's a connection for you. Or you can just send me an email and I'll get it. If you send it to the homeless education inbox, that is a great resource. It may take us a few months, so it's actually going to be faster if you work with a fellow liaison in your area or ESC McKinney-Vento liaison. If we're working on it, it will be a few month turnaround and likely not until the summer for us to get something like that going. But yes, okay. Anne has created a similar spreadsheet. She doesn't have it as a blank. It's filled with student data. If she's able to make it, you can reach out to Anne if she's open to that. Oh, Anne's going to create a sample and share it with me. And Anne, if you want to pop your email in there, just modeling how you guys can network and connect across Texas. Like, don't feel like you have to recreate the reel. There's always resources for you and people to connect with that have things, and you can make it your own in your own school district. But definitely send that email. And if that resource is being used, and if anyone reaches out to you, let me know. Love sharing those kinds of practices. Okay, cool. And then as you're looking at this, provide that school of origin, busing information to parents. That letter is a great starting spot. What I did with the letter is I copied all of that information into an email, and it was easier for my transportation contact to send that guidance once they had routed it because they were doing the routing. So they would put exactly what the routing information was at the top of the email, and then all of that good guidance in the letter that was there ended up being our template email of what we used. So that's just a suggestion of how you can take a sample letter or take a template, modify it to a process that's going to be easier and more efficient for you and your school district. Look at all this sharing of contact information. That is so awesome. And if you guys are game, if you're sharing your information in the chat, if you guys are okay, if we, yeah, I'm gonna go with this. So if you see information in the chat of people that you want to connect with, go ahead and connect with them in the chat. And an easy way to do that, guys, is I'm gonna do this real quick because I think networking is super, super important. I did that every webinar that I attended. On the webinar chat feature for you guys, you can actually select anybody that's in here. So if you want to connect with them through the chat, you can click on them. It'll say Desiree is just typing to Carrie Stephen and all the panelists. So you can directly connect with whoever you want to, or you can have it for everyone. So just a quick trick as you're in webinars and you're wanting to network. I always did a trade-off too. So if I was sharing a spreadsheet, and Anne, you may want to do this. If you're trying to create something or a training or to explain something, a document, something else, it was always going to be like, hey, I'm going to send you this, but by chance, do you have X, Y, and Z that I'm currently working on and don't have time to create? Awesome. Love it. Also make sure that you have a process to communicate any changes or adjustments needed for transportation services. This is also why the transportation contact headed up that email. We also included on there pertinent school personnel. So the principal, the contact for that campus, the parent or guardian. Also, we had the McKinney-Vento liaison. So transportation would communicate all of that. And this was very important if there was a change or adjustment. Let's say if they were routing and they had to make a slight adjustment to a time or a mode of transportation, they would just reply all to that email so everybody was informed. And then that way, like if you're a school administrator out there and you're looking at the bus line, you're like, oh, I now need to anticipate it being a district vehicle. It's no longer this bus. So it was just a great, efficient way to keep communication with all of the pertinent people on an email. We also would print that out and keep that in the student file. Woo, this is great. I love it. You guys are, I see all the networking going on, and I think that is really, really, really awesome. Lisa has 3 interns working for her. I also did interns. So if Lisa's open to it, connect with Lisa on how you can get intern support. I know in a post-ARP world, getting support for McKinney-Vento can be a little bit tough. That's a great hack and a way to work around that. All right, so LEA requirements, you have to transport students experiencing homelessness to and from their school of origin at the parents' request. If they reside outside of the LEA boundaries, the LEAs have to agree on how to split the responsibility, cost of transportation, or share them equally. You can share the cost, which is like the actual money. So that could be where one school district is doing transportation for both AM and PM. But as shared responsibility per the McKinney-Vento law, they are reimbursing the other school district for that other half of transportation. So how the districts split the responsibility is completely up to the 2 school districts, as long as they're shared equally under the federal law. And as a reminder for these requirements, students experiencing homelessness can stay at their school of origin until the end of the school year, even if they move into permanent housing. So once they are identified, let's say they were living in a shelter in August, or they were living in a hotel motel because they had lost their job, and then fast forward to a few months later, but it's the same school year, they have now gotten stable housing and they have a lease in an apartment, they can still be provided school of origin transportation that goes until the end of the school year. Again, if you have any scenarios or nuances, please reach out to your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison, and you can also reach out to the homeless education inbox. And then the last point on this, students experiencing homelessness can attend their school of origin and that feeder school for the duration of their homelessness. So I just want to really touch on this point. If they're attending their school of origin, yes, we do the determination by year, but a family can be in a duration of homelessness for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And so we check in with them at the beginning of each school year. Throw a thumbs up if you know this process. We check in with them at the beginning of the school year to do that, and then they qualify for that school year based off that determination. But that 1 year is not necessarily the duration. It could be longer, it could be shorter. Awesome. Thank you guys. I love all of that. I'm going to let Dr. Lay jump into this next part.
School transportation and funding. And yes, there are a few questions in the Q&A regarding funding, and we will address as many as possible. But school transportation funding is also known as transportation allotment and is part of the overall foundation school program. The provisions of transportation funding is governed by TEC 48.151, and Mr. Dobbins is going to drop the link to where you can find this information, and also the link to the transportation handbook. Effective with the passage of House Bill 3, each district or county operating a regular transportation system is entitled to an allotment based on a rate per mile per regular eligible student set by the legislature in the General Appropriation Act. And this General Appropriation Act, Article 3, establishes the funding rate for the eligible transportation. So you can click on, Mr. Dobbins has dropped that link. The requirements are found in TA's School Transportation Allotment Handbook. And you'll see a screenshot on the slide that's posted there. So now we are at our next pause to process. We have a lot of questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and pose a question and see if we can't answer that. And I'm gonna try to get one at the very top. And I do appreciate, your patience, and we are trying to get through as many as possible. Okay. Well, this one's part of the funding here. So Dr. Viramontes, if we have already used all of our Title I funds, is there any other funding available to assist with homeless transportation?
Well, there is a couple of funding options. One, you can use a portion of your, if you applied for the competitive grant, um, you can use a portion of it for School of Origin transportation. So that's one. So that would be touchy McKinney-Vento federal funding. The second one, as you pointed out, is Title I. You can use Title I Part A set aside funding to help with transportation. And then just depending on what transportation you're navigating, there are instances that state comp ed can help out with that. I've seen that happen before, and that would have to be a part of your district improvement plan if you're doing that. And then I also really want to say this because when we were navigating this at the school district level, many, many years ago at this time, pre-COVID, what we saw was we were using an outside transportation service. And you guys can throw a thumbs up if any of you guys are using an outside transportation service, because that happens with different school districts. And that can be a great way to do it. For us, we had a huge increase in students experiencing homelessness after that hurricane that hit us pre-COVID and across the state. And what ended up happening is we doubled how many students we were transporting. And so what was a good solution of using an outside entity to do that transportation ended up becoming $1 million, and it was only February. Like, so we not only ran out of money, we blew the budget out of the water. And so what we did is the McKinney-Vento personnel, myself, worked with transportation. We had intentional meetings to brainstorm. What could we do? How could we approach this? How could we put systems in place? And so what we did is we decided it was going to take longer to kind of on-ramp this, but we were going to purchase as a district vehicles to help with transportation, both White Fleet as well as like buses to do that. And that ended up being one of the best decisions that we could have made. And our transportation cost went down by 30%, which was a huge deal for our school district. So there's a lot of times where brainstorming around it can be very, very, oh, sure. Mia is asking, can you guys drop in the chat any of the names of outside transportation services that you currently use? It's been a while for me, so I'll let you guys put them in there. And then Mia, just go ahead and grab those from the chat. And she's a new liaison, guys. So if any of you guys want to grab her contact information and show how friendly all of us McKinney-Vento liaisons can be in helping out, if she has any questions, that would be so great if you could support her. Yeah, so when we did that, we were able to drop it by 30%. And then I also remember through ARP funding, so you have to get creative. So you got to work with different school personnel, get creative. One of the other solutions that we ended up offering was we did prepaid cards, and we offered that to our families while they were waiting to get routed. There was a time during COVID where there was a 2-week timeline to get transportation started, which was just the nature of like some school districts still being hybrid. And throw a thumbs up if you guys were here for that time and you went through that, where transportation timelines were just really, really long. So we offered prepaid cards, and they would work with like the family that they were living with or coming up with different forms of transportation, because sometimes needing School of Origin transportation for our families can just be a matter of how much it costs. And so doing the prepaid cards allowed them to be able to get gas for the folks to do transport in a short time period, so that they were able to continue school. And what we noticed from that is that our numbers for transportation needing to be routed kind of dropped in some ways, because we were able to support some of our families through those prepaid cards. And that is really where like your outside community entities can donate cards. We had huge donations that came in to help with that, which was great. They literally just donated prepaid cards for us to be able to do that for local grocery stores. At the time as HEB and also Walmart that had good gas services where we were located. In different school districts that I've worked in, there was different options, but that was one of the ways that we were able to do that. Then I'm seeing, ooh, another Desiree, awesome. I was seeing DART passes for older kids. Yes, you can do bus passes. I know a lot of the bigger urban school districts have do bus passes, which can be free. In Dallas as well as Austin, I know Austin for sure came out with a new law while I was a liaison that allowed our students to, if you had your student ID, you could get on the bus and show your student ID and travel for free. So that was like, that cost the school district nothing to start providing bus passes, and it really took down the amount of money that was being spent on that. Ashley is saying that Quick Trip will donate cards. Yeah, some of your gas stations are really good collaborative partners that you can have. I had 20 car families, and I worked with a lot of local gas station managers to help families do anything from doing a lice treatment to like being able to cook their food. For a couple of the students that were living at a camp, there was a gas station manager and owner that was really amazing, and he let them use the microwave while we were trying to find them housing. Yeah, so just different things that you can do to support that. Now you guys are getting all the good thinking going on. I'm loving it. We're going to dive into systems to support School of Origin and Transportation Services. So go ahead, Dr. Lay.
All right. Okay. So the impact of School of Origin Transportation Services, McKinney-Vento liaisons facilitate this process to ensure that students experiencing homelessness can maintain four things: school stability, consistent attendance, continuity of educational services, and positive academic outcomes. What does this mean? This means that children are in school, they are attending, they're receiving their educational services that they are entitled to, and they are succeeding due to this accommodation. So my question for you is, who do you collaborate and communicate with to facilitate McKinney-Vento School of Origin and Transportation Services? Pop that into the chat and let's see what we got.
Yay. I know you guys are, oh, transportation director. I was like, yes, some of these school personnel can take a while to type up. Ooh, lots of transportation director. ESC liaison. I love that. Assistant director of transportation, assistant superintendent of schools, transportation staff. This is awesome. Great. Social workers. So there's a variety of school personnel.
Don't forget about the parents and unaccompanied youth. Community shelters.
Nice.
Great job, guys.
Love it. You can also work with LEA special programs. So that could be special education, emergent bilingual. It could be just depending on if you have dual identified students and different things. Community shelters, motels, hotels to hang up different posters, all different kinds of things. Love it. Guys, keep it going in the chat. I know some of those titles can be quite cumbersome to type in. Very, very cool. So collaboration with McKinney-Vento liaison and transportation staff. I already hit on this, so I kind of already previewed it, but this is ways that you can do it. You can meet with transportation staff to plan and develop transportation processes and protocols. This could be as quick and easy as like, I brought like Starbucks to one of my routers when I was first starting to like kind of open up that relationship and like get talking. We had an incredible donation from South by Southwest, which is an event in our area. And I brought t-shirts for, man, we had so many t-shirts. We probably got like, they gave us a donation of 5,000 t-shirts and we only had 1,000 students experiencing homelessness. So once we reached that capacity with our families and our students, what I ended up doing is taking it over to our transportation folks, and they wore them and they were super happy to wear them, which was really awesome. So just different things, and like creating that rapport and that relationship with your transportation staff can be really critical. If you guys want to pop in the chat different ways that you work with your transportation staff to have a good relationship. They're also the ones that work with the other school districts. So they're very important characters and how you're working with it, and personnel that you're working with as you're doing it. Also establish a McKinney-Vento transportation point of contact. That can be really critical. Follow all your local school district transportation policies for student safety. That's critical, and your transportation staff is going to know that. And then establish a cadence of meeting with your McKinney-Vento transportation staff, or what that looks like to monitor your McKinney-Vento students. Like I said, with like the no call, no shows, like you need to, we did it as a report that we were able to check and touch base with our families, but you do need some kind of system and process in place to make sure you're monitoring that transportation, that you're being a good steward of your district's funding or federal funding that is coming in to support transportation services. That's another way to make sure, like if you have, or you're looking for ways for money, is like making sure the money that you are using definitely goes along with supporting cost-effective measures like the 3 no calls, drop them off the transportation or get it routed so that it can be utilized. And you surprise them with lots of treats all year long, cookies, donuts, pizza when they're not expecting it and they love it. I love that. That's amazing. Regina is meeting weekly with transportation department lead for McKinney-Vento students, which is awesome. We had it where like sometimes you want to have a regular cadence, but you also want to have an open line of communication. So though you don't share your cell phone number with your families, sharing your cell phone number with your transportation contact within your school district might be a good idea. Especially if you are 8 to 5 or have a different thing and transportation is running later than that, they can help alert you to different things. Right, perfect. All right, so McKinney-Vento School of Origin training information. There's lots of rich information that we've gone over in here. So providing that annual training and resources to LEA personnel in McKinney-Vento. So this is really a slide that you could really, hey, what training do I have to cover to really help explain School of Origin and transportation services in my district? And these are all the critical components that you need to include in that training. So enrollment, identification, your intake process, what School of Origin program services look like for you and your school district. What is our process? Like how explaining that to school personnel to request School of Origin transportation services, how long do they go, what the McKinney-Vento liaison referral process looks like. And also the second part is very important is how do you tell parents, guardians, unaccompanied youth, campus staff that students experiencing homelessness are getting this transportation? How it's being routed. I shared that our transportation folks included that on an email with all of the LEA staff and the parents and McKinney-Vento liaison once it had been routed with all of that information so they all knew. So getting on the same page for that. You may have different processes and procedures, so please make sure that you're doing that. And you're including all the information that we talked about. Again, using that sample transportation letter is a great way for that informing parents and guardians. Challenges and barriers related to School of Origin transportation. Attendance, that's a big one. And that is like the better you get at your School of Origin transportation, the easier it's going to be. There's high mobility, so they could be changing. Like if you have a 3 to 5 day timeline, but they've already moved, having that high mobility can be hard to get the School of Origin transportation to catch. As well as accessibility. Maybe you live in a rural area and you don't have access to all the different resources that may be in an urban area. So it just depends. And these are things that you guys are navigating as you're helping students and families, but them knowing that you're a collaborative partner there to support them can really, really be helpful. Another best practice is supporting students residing in shelters. I don't know if you guys have this, but we had this. If you have a domestic violence shelter in your area, go ahead and throw a thumbs up. Having a designated shelter contact in there, providing McKinney-Vento training to that shelter staff, or having them come do training with you 1 day a year, or even recording it. You can do it as a Zoom thing. I've seen all different kinds of things happen. For domestic violence, so while I bring that up is you may not be able to connect with all of your shelters, but your domestic violence shelters can be very pivotal in determining a safe pickup and drop off protocol. And also explaining to transportation, in order to provide transportation, you have to provide the address. We had an undisclosed domestic violence shelter. And so it was very important that we kept that as confidential. And between our McKinney-Vento staff and our transportation staff, we didn't even share that with the school of where they were living because it was a huge safety concern. And we worked that out with the shelter staff. And also establishing a communication process with the shelter staff and the families. This can be very difficult when you're trying to set up everything, especially if you're a new liaison. So this is why I always suggest, please make sure that you are really creating a network of support for yourself, finding other district liaisons in other school districts that have been doing different things so that you're not having to recreate everything. Just a pro tip for y'all. And your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison is a great place to start with that networking. All right, so LEA strategies to support School of Origin services, develop policies and procedures to support implementation of these services. So that could be in your district policies, making a district policy to help support it. partnering with other school districts to coordinate out-of-district transportation services. That could be done within your transportation department. If you're a smaller school district, that could be you as a liaison and doing that. So it just depends on what your context is. And this is very important for the money aspect of it. Really monitor transportation services regularly to ensure continuity of services. Families always appreciate like when you reach out and you're like, oh, I didn't see you there. I meant to call you. I've been trying to call you, but I've been working and also trying to drop them off. Like we've moved, we need a new request. So reaching out to your families and making that part of how you monitor your transportation services can be very, very pivotal and helpful. And then also providing that busing information and any new student or family contact information to the appropriate campus and LEA contact. Like I've said throughout the webinar, we did that as an email so that everybody was on the same page. And actually, if there was like a question from an administrator or school staff or the parent, everybody was aware of what that question was and could be informed of that information as it was going. This is those considerations implementing school of origin transportation services. So just another way for you to look at it as a checklist. So you have develop LEA policies and procedures to support implementation of school of origin transportation services, establish a transportation point of contact to support the development of transportation processes and protocols, collaborate with shelter, hotel, motel, transitional housing staff to develop transportation safety protocols. And then of course, at the end, like really make sure on the training aspect that you're including school of origin program services and procedures in your annual McKinney-Vento trainings. Those trainings can be as simple as creating recordings that you can send out if you get new staff throughout the year. It can be part of your annual staff training if you do Canvas or how you guys do modules. You can make it as a module. There's many different ways that you can do training that doesn't have to be in person, but you can also do in person. I was embedded within transportations, nurses, I'm trying to think like health services, as well as registrars. So as they did their meetings throughout the year, they would ask me, hey, do you have something for our meeting that is coming up, our quarterly meeting? I'd be like, absolutely. And I would hop into those to give them reminders and also let them know like, hey, this is the kind of support that we've been seeing that our families need. It was a great way to get there. So those are just different ways that you can look at training. How can you be successful? So here's some key actions for success, and I'm going to have Dr. Lay go ahead and go over this.
Yes, thank you. So if you are a McKinney-Vento liaison, please remember these key actions. So they follow under assessing school of origin. This covers determining and documenting school of origin services during the intake process and also communicating with parents, guardians, and unaccompanied youth. For school of origin transportation request process, make sure to develop an intake process that assesses and documents the school of origin transportation during the enrollment and during the school year, and also communicating and providing parents, guardians, and unaccompanied youth this process and communicate any changes or adjustments that's needed. And then also implementing the school of origin transportation services, making sure LEA policies and procedures are developed to support the implementation of school of origin transportation services, and also establishing McKinney-Vento transportation point of contact in order to support the development of transportation processes and protocols. Remember to utilize your neighboring LEA McKinney-Vento contacts. You have your Region Education Service Center McKinney-Vento liaisons and also the TECHI support. So we are moving into our next pause to process. And let me grab, and we are going to have some time at the very end of this webinar to be able to address a lot more of the questions. So we do appreciate your patience. So we have a question here. If a child,
let's take one question. What you got?
Oh, one question. Ooh, okay. So there's so many. I'm sorry.
I know. We'll get
I'm
to
just gonna grab it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what is the next step McKinney-Ventos can do after family continuously has no-shows? Can a letter be sent to family where transportation will no longer be provided due to no-shows and parents will need to provide their own transportation or enroll at a zoned campus?
There's a lot in that question. So I'm gonna start from the beginning of it, and I'm gonna say, and using our template. So let's say you did the transportation letter that has your no call, no show guidance. And you started with the intake process, you said that verbally, you provided that in an email to the family or printed it out for the family or did both of those. And then you have a family that is not showing up. So what you would do is, or what I did as a best practice is I would call the family to see where they were at. And more times than not, I would have to do a new transportation request. One, because they had moved, so they were no longer there, and I'd have to do a new request anyways. Or it could also be that there was a medical crisis or something had come up for the family, and that's why they weren't using transportation. And you'll get that, can we please have one more, can we have one more day to try it? And so I would talk to transportation and I would say, like, providing that flexibility, because as a liaison, you're also trying to remove barriers to education and be as efficient as possible. So I would tell them, sure, we can try one more day. And that would be like after I texted my, like, after I texted my contact, and they'd be like, okay, we'll do it one more day. But just let them know, like, you do have to call if you're not going to use transportation. And like, this is the phone number that you call, and go through that with them. When you're also doing that with the family, you can do it like, let's say you've done all of that, you had the phone call with them, they still didn't show up, then it's totally fine to do. I did a call and an email to let them know, we are taking you off of this transportation. We've had 3 no call, no shows, and we did one more chance, for that. It was also no call, no show. So we're taking you off transportation. If you would like to set up School of Origin transportation in the future, please send me an email with the updated address or address that you need transportation. And then I would also put information about, please recognize that you will be starting as a new transportation request with whatever the timeline was at the time, because it can change throughout the year. And give me a call if you need additional information. So that was typically what I would do. And I'd get a call back, and I could have some frustrated parents, and then I would explain it to them and say, like, our goal is to have open communication and transparency. And also, like, at the time I was transporting 300 students. And so if the transportation is very important, and we have students that are waiting to be transported, and so you really have to follow this local policy and procedure in order to participate with the School of Origin transportation. There's times when you're having that phone call and that conversation that you can do the best interest conversation with them, to determine if, is this still something that you want to do? Ultimately, under the federal law, it is the parent or guardian who gets to make that determination, or unaccompanied youth, of do they want to continue at the School of Origin. It is not up to school personnel. Under the federal law, it's for the parent or guardian to decide. The liaison can do another best interest conversation with them to go through that checklist. And I will drop it in the chat for you guys. You just have to give me a few minutes, but I'll drop it before the end of the webinar. And you do the best interest conversation, and you go through all of the different things that could be going on for the family, what's going on at that time. So just keep that in mind. They will always, once they've been identified as homeless, they, under the federal law, have the right to School of Origin transportation services, and it's a balance. So even if they don't do it and you drop them off of transportation, if they call you and they want transportation again, or they want to stay at their School of Origin, under federal law, we do need to keep them enrolled. We also need to keep them, we also need to give them that option for School of Origin transportation, even if it's like, we've dropped you from the no call, no show. If they call the next day and you got to start the process, that happens. I don't know if any of you guys have experienced that, where it can take a while for folks to actually use the transportation. Do you guys have families that do a lot of no calls, no shows? If you guys want to do a thumbs up, and if you have any like tips and tricks that you also use. Nice. Okay, so we include it on the verbiage on our intake form and explain it. Nice. Thank you, Dr. Lay, for putting school selection and best interest determination. There is a checklist that is on the second part of that, and I will show that to you guys really quick so you can see it. This is what I was talking about with the checklist. So she dropped this in the chat for you to use. School of Origin consideration, as well as the zone school. So here are all the things that you should go through with your parents when you're doing the best interest conversation. When I did this, I just made this into a form so I could fill it out. And I also shared this with school personnel as they asked for it. So that's an excellent resource that you can use. It's also in the chat, and we appreciate that really excellent question. And now we're going to go through all of our general reminders. I
All
think we're going to go
right.
through all the general reminders. If I can get to the
Yes, we
next
are.
page, hold on. All right, Dr. Lay, take it away.
All right, general reminder. So on the first reminder that we have here, when we presented our McKinney-Vento 101, we let you guys know that we had updated our Techi infographics. Desiree, if you can go on to the next slide. Our Techi infographics at that time using 22 to 23 data. We are happy to announce that we have a new Techi infographics for the 2024 school year using 23-24 data. And what's Mr. Dobbins has dropped that link in there for you. And if you notice, we have the highest number at this time of students experiencing homelessness, 121,000 and plus. Our unaccompanied youth percentage has decreased, but wanted to let you guys know this was released January 10th, and it is the most up-to-date PEMS data code that we do have. Moving into our next reminder is our Techi Discipline Toolkit that was released out in October 23rd. We do want to mention that there has been a slight adjustment to 2 or 3 of our pages. So we did redistribute that. The link still works with the updated toolkit. The content is still the same, but we did update it a couple weeks ago and just wanted to let you guys know that. There is a QR code that you can scan to get to the toolkit and the recording, but also Mr. Dobbins will go ahead and drop the link to that as well. I want to know how many through emojis your LEAs have already adopted and started implementing the tools and strategies from this toolkit, because I've heard a few. Oh, look at that. We are so excited. I get emails, text messages all the time from LEAs that I used to work at, and they are so excited. So we hope that this is a valuable resource that is helping to support our students experiencing homelessness. I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Vetamontes real quick about transportation and discipline.
Awesome. I saw a question when it's asking about discipline and transportation, and I am so excited to tell you that we are going to touch on that in our McKinney-Vento 401. So thank you for asking that question. And definitely when we put up the slide for future opportunities, if you want to know more about that, please sign up for that opportunity. So there is in the discipline toolkit transportation considerations on page 13 in particular that we want to draw your attention to. This is exactly what McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act requires school districts to adopt these policies and practices to ensure transportation is provided to and from the school of origin at the request of the parent, guardian, and unaccompanied youth. LEAs must provide comparable services for students experiencing homelessness in consideration of discipline determinations. That could be like an example could be special education transportation. It's important that school leaders address transportation needs for homeless students when discipline and truancy matters occur. The following is a list of key laws and important factors to consider when addressing discipline and truancy. So let's say that you have a student that has a DAP placement and they're getting school of origin transportation at their school of origin. Transportation must continue to be provided if it is a placement at DAP is determined. Of course, if you have any scenarios or anything that comes up for you, please feel free to reach out to your ESC McKinney-Vento liaison or the homeless education inbox. But yes, you would provide transportation services to alternative campuses such as DAP. In circumstances when school of origin transportation is being provided by 2 school districts, it must continue to be provided if a placement at DAEP is determined. School districts should develop a system so the students experiencing homelessness is not considered absent or have truancy notifications when there are setup delays. So like I've said, like there was a 3 to 5 day timeline. Something that you should have in place is that you're working with your attendance personnel to make sure that they are not being considered absent when it is due to school of origin transportation being set up. And that is included when you're doing DAP placements. Also keep in mind that this requires school districts to ensure that transportation is provided to and from the school of origin at the request of the parent, guardian, and unaccompanied youth. And when you're looking at it, if the children use transportation, if they live in the area served by the LEA in which the school of origin is located, the transportation must continue to be provided if a placement at DAP is determined. Oh, this is the same one. Okay. Sorry, guys. We had a repeat on there.
Okay, so just another reminder here, after the toolkit was released out, we had a 1 hour walkthrough webinar of the discipline toolkit. It was very high level. We had this in November, and what we wanted to just highlight that we are having a part 2, as we mentioned, and that will be at our McKinney-Vento 401 that we have already scheduled out. And Mr. Dobbins is going to drop the link to both the recorded discipline webinar, but also the registration for our 401. And we're happy to include, to announce that our student discipline team here at TEA is gonna be a guest speaker and co-host of our webinar. So super excited. So we're anticipating a full crowd. So take a look if you haven't already of the recording. And then we look forward to seeing you at our 401. So the next slide, mentioning our Techi web portal. If you have not already browsed through our Techi web portal, this is new for this school year, and we are constantly updating our web portal with resources and professional development. And with that, our resource library, there's a tab on there, and you can specifically search for transportation related resources, and that's what's popping up on this slide right now. The transportation resources will be filtered out, and you can do that to look for other things as well, but specifically for transportation, since this is our webinar for transportation. And then also announcing that if you are not aware of your regional McKinney-Vento liaisons, they are the extension of TEA. They're here to help you and to bridge the gap between LEAs and TEAs, but also supporting you with all things McKinney-Vento. And so Mr. Dobbins is also going to drop the link to where you can locate your regional McKinney-Vento liaison contact information on our Techi web portal. So this here you see is region 1 to 10, and then there's 11 to 20 right there. And also noting is, as your LEA, making sure that Ask TED is also updated. So if you are a McKinney-Vento liaison and it's not reflected in Ask TED, we do have guidance, and we can drop that into the link in a bit to how you can get that updated. And we update that regularly. We have some upcoming trainings and also our Techi Talks, which is our version of our office hours. The last that we said is our McKinney-Vento 401, which is March 13th and from 11 to 1, same time. And then the registration link, we can drop that into the chat as well. Our Techi Talks are very informal. There's no slide deck. It's an open opportunity for you to ask any and all questions that you are dying to ask us. We have one in February, April, and then May. And then just a reminder of our 24-25 HMIR webinars. We have one coming up in 2 weeks, February 13th from 1 to 2:30. And then we have our last one on May 1st. And Mr. Dobbins is going to drop that. Oh, he already did. He's quicker than me. And then lastly, everyone has always asked, how do we know when things are dropped? How do we stay up to date? Remember to sign up for updates. This is our listserv. You can scan the QR code, or Mr. Dobbins is going to drop the link as well. And this is how you're notified of when the recording is available. Any announcements or updates that we may send out. If you weren't part of the listserv, we did announce our McKinney-Vento newsletter recently. So make sure that you are subscribe so that you can receive those announcements. All right, we have 15 minutes left, and we are loving it because we have a lot of questions. So our last portion is going to be a Q&A section, but I'm going to ask Dr. Vitamontes, yes, to put this up. So if you are not going to stay to listen to the Q&A, or you're ready to go and getting back to work, please submit a feedback survey for us. This is the QR code. Mr. Dobbins is going to drop the link in case you don't have a way to access it with your phone right now. Just take a couple minutes, complete the survey. It's very quick, just a couple of questions. We would love to get your feedback so that we can continue to improve and make sure that our trainings are adapted to your needs.
And if you're attending this by doing the recording, We do encourage you to fill out this survey feedback. We are constantly looking at feedback and how we can improve our trainings. So we do take it very seriously as a TETU team. And at this time, we are going to end the recording and finish up if you want to stay on for any of our questions. So Anne, if you will stop the recording.
And